Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everyone doing today? I hope everyone is having a lovely and wonderful day. Sarah, hello, good morning. How are you doing today, friend? I am doing wonderfully. You're having a good day. I'm so happy. I'm so happy you're having a good day. First, hi, Cal. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for stopping by. Today, we're going to be reading... Did I tell you my David Bowie story on your stream? I think you did, but I don't remember or recall, so probably not. I don't remember. I don't remember. But yeah. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful and lovely day. I hope so. I hope so. Where's my chat box? Not popping up again! God dang it. I don't know why this happens all the time. Let me double check. Hold on. My lovely chat. Where is my lovely chat? It almost never wants to show up. So annoying. Anywho, I hope all of you are having a lovely and wonderful day. We are reading a new story excuse me. I had some orange juice before I started. We're starting a new story today. We were gonna finish Lily's Ghost, but you know what? I think I'm going to try to revisit that story a little later on down the road. My mindset wasn't exactly in the right place to read that story. So what's gonna happen is today we're gonna read the novelization of the hit 80s movie Labyrinth, starring Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie. So we're gonna read the novelization. It's derived from the original source material, the original scripts, all that sort of stuff. So it's gonna be a fun time. It's gonna be a fun time. I'm excited. I'm so excited. I hope you guys are ready too. Because this is gonna be fun. I'm just checking some last minute stuff real quick. Making sure everything is running as I should be, because as you guys may have noticed, I got some new settings and stuff happening. So I'm just double checking. I got some new background music courtesy of a free music archive online. I got a bunch of new settings and stuff. Alright, I think everything sounds really good, so that's good. We're still doing a lot of, if you hear anything in the background, I still have a lot of stuff being moved from the sub-basements into, like, the trash and stuff. Oh, there's my chat! Why is my chat so delayed? Holy crap, why was that so delayed? Okay. So yeah, I got a bunch of stuff and things happening in my background, so if you hear anything in my background, just ignore it. We're doing a lot of moving. We had an anomaly not too long ago come through and destroy a good part of the sub-basement, so if you hear things banging and moving around, it's the other scientists and creators, helpers and stuff trying to move stuff out of the sub-basements. All the broken stuff that we no longer can be salvaged. So, you know, if you hear banging in the background, just ignore it. I promise at some point I'm going to soundproof my room so that way you don't have to hear all the nonsense. Anyway, I've been waiting on this story time with you. I'm glad. This is gonna be fun. I've only read this novelization once. But it has left such an impression in my brain that I'm excited to share with you guys today, so I'm gonna do that. That is what I'm gonna do, so I hope you guys can sit back, relax, and enjoy. Yes. Let's see. Labyrinth novelization. Adapted by A.C.H. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Miss, or whomever Smith. Much appreciated. Just going through all the credits and blank pages books tend to have. Table of contents. Hi, Icy. Hello. Good morning. I'm just scrolling through the table of contents, trying to get everything done for the story. We are reading the novelization of the hit 80s movie Labyrinth. I'm excited. Going through all that. There we go. Oh my. Hold on. I need need to fix some settings. I need to fix some settings. Give me one moment, please. That looks very, very small. No, that's not what I want. The text is a little small. Give me a second. I'm trying to fix it. Reader. Oh, there we go. Okay, that works. There we go. I can see the letters now. Me waiting for my mom to finish her call of the telephone to tell her I drink all the milk. Oh, Jesus Christ! Don't make yourself sick now. Don't make yourself sick, Icy. That is not good. That is not good. All right, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Chapter 1: The White Owl. Nobody saw the owl, white in the moonlight, black against the stars. Nobody heard him as he glided over on silent wings of velvet. The owl saw and heard everything. He settled in a tree, his claws hooked on a branch, and he stared at the grove and the glade below. The wind moaned, rocking the branch, scuttled low clouds across the evening sky. It lifted. Sorry, I was listening out for the weird stuff happening in my background. Sorry. Let's see. The wind moaned, rocking the branch, scuttling low clouds across the evening sky. It lifted the hair of the girl. The owl was watching her, with round, dark eyes. The girl moved slowly from the trees towards the middle of the glade, where a pool glimmered. She was concentrating. Each deliberate step took her nearer to her purpose. Her hands were open, and held slightly in front of her. The wind sighed against the trees. It blew her cloak tightly against her slender figure, and rustled the hair around her wide-eyed face. Her lips were parted. "Give me the child," Sarah said, in a voice that was low but firm, with the courage her quest needed. She halted, her hands still held out. "Give me the child," she repeated. "Through dangers untold and hardships unnumbered, I have fought my way here to the castle beyond the Goblin City, to take back the child you have stolen." She bit her lip and continued. "For my will is as strong as yours, and my kingdom as great." She closed her eyes tightly. Thunder rumbled. The owl blinked once. "My will is as strong as yours," Sarah spoke with even more intensity now, "and my kingdom as great." She frowned, and her shoulders dropped. "Oh, damn," she muttered. Reaching under her cloak, she brought out a book. Its title was The Labyrinth. Holding the book up before her, she read aloud from it. In the fading light, it was not easy to make out the words. "You have no power over me." She got no further. Another clap of thunder, nearer this time, made her jump. It also alarmed a big, shaggy sheepdog, who she had not minded sitting by the pool and being admonished by Sarah, but who now decided that it was time to go home, and said so with several sharp barks. Sarah held her cloak around her. It did not give her much warmth, being no more than an old curtain, cut down and fastened at the neck by a glass brooch. She ignored Merlin, the sheepdog, while concentrating on learning the speech in the book. "You have no power over me," she whispered. She closed her eyes and repeated the phrase several times. A clock above the little pavilion in the park chimed 7 times and penetrated Sarah's concentration. She stared at Merlin. "Oh no," she said. "I don't believe it. That was 7, wasn't it?" Merlin stood up and shook himself, sensing that some more interesting action was due. Sarah turned and ran. Merlin followed. The thundercloud spattered them both with large drops of rain. The owl had watched it all. When Sarah and Merlin left the park, he still sat on his branch, in no hurry to follow them. This was his time of day. He knew what he wanted. An owl was born with all his questions answered. All the way down the street, which was lined on both sides with private hedged Victorian houses similar to her own, Sarah was muttering to herself, "It's not fair, it's not fair." The mutter had turned into a gasp by the time she came within sight of her home. Merlin, having bounded along with her on his shaggy paws, was wheezy too. His mistress, who normally moved at a gentle, dreamy pace, had this odd habit of liking to sprint home from the park in the evening. Perhaps that owl had something to do with it. Merlin was not sure. He didn't like the owl. He knew that. "It's not fair!" Sarah was close to sobbing. The world at large was not fair. Hardly ever. But in particular, her stepmother was ruthlessly not fair to her. There she stood now, in the front doorway of the house, all dressed up in that frightful dark blue evening gown of hers, the fur coat left open to reveal the low cut of her neckline, the awful necklace vulgarly wrinkling above her freckled breast. And, wouldn't you know, she was looking at her watch. Not just looking at it, but staring at it, to make good and sure that Sarah would feel guilty before she was accused again. As Sarah came to a halt on the path in the front garden, she could hear her baby brother, Toby, bawling inside the house. He was her half-brother, really, but she did not like to call him that, not since her school friend Alice had asked, "What's the other half of him then?" And Sarah had been unable to think of an answer. "Have nothing to do with me." That was no good. It wasn't true either. Sometimes she felt fiercely protective of Toby, wanted to dress him up and carry him in her arms and take him away from all this, to a better place, a fairer world, an island somewhere perhaps. At other times, and this was one, she hated Toby, who had twice as many parents in attendance on him as she had. When she hated Toby, it frightened her, because it led her into thinking about how she could hurt him. There must be something wrong with me, she would reflect, and that I can think of even hurting someone I dote upon. Or is that there's something wrong with doting upon someone I hate? She wished she had a friend who would understand the dilemma, and maybe explain it to her, but there was no one. Her friends at school would think her a witch if she were to mention the idea of hurting Toby, and as for her father, it would frighten him even more than it frightened Sarah herself, so she kept the perplexity well hidden. Sarah stood before her stepmother and deliberately held her head high. "I'm sorry," she said in a bored voice, to show that she wasn't sorry at all. And anyway, it was unnecessary to make a thing out of it. "Well," her stepmother told her, "don't stand out there in the rain. Come on." She stood aside, to make room for Sarah to pass her in the doorway, and she glanced again at her wristwatch. Sarah made a point of never touching her stepmother, not even brushing against her clothes. She edged inside close to the doorframe. Merlin started to follow her. "Not the dog," her stepmother said. "But it's pouring." The stepmother whacked her finger at Merlin twice. "In the garage, you," she commanded. "Go on." Merlin dropped his head and lopped around the side of the house. Sarah watched him go and bit her lip. Why, she wondered for the trillionth time, does my stepmother always have to put on this performance when they go out in the evening? It was so hammy. That was one of Sarah's favorite words. Since she had heard her mother's co-star, Jeremy, used to put down another actor in that play they were doing. Such a ragbag of over-the-top cliches. She remembered how Jeremy had sounded French when he said cliches, thrilling her with his sophistication. Why couldn't her stepmother find a new way into the part? Oh, she loved the way in which Jeremy talked about other actors. She was determined to become an actress herself, so that she could talk like that all the time. Her father seldom talked at all about people at his office, and when he did, it was dreary in comparison. Her stepmother closed the front door and looked at her watch once more, took a deep breath, and started one of her cliched speeches. "Sarah, you're an hour late." Sarah opened her mouth, but her stepmother cut her off with a little humorless smile. Please let me finish, Sarah. Your father and I go out very rarely. You go out every weekend, Sarah interrupted rapidly. Her stepmother ignored that. And I ask you to babysit only if it won't interfere with your plans. How would you know? Sarah had half turned away, so as not to flatter her stepmother with her attention, and was busy putting her book on the hall stand, unclipping her brooch and folding the cloak over her arm. You don't know what my plans are. You don't ask me. She glanced at her own face in the mirror on the hall stand, shaking that her expression was cool and poised, not over the top. She liked the clothes she was wearing. A cream-colored shirt with full sleeves, a brocaded waistcoat loosely over the shirt, blue jeans, and a leather belt. She turned even farther away from her stepmother to check on how her shirt hung from her breast down to her waist. She tucked it in a little to her belt to make it tighter. Her stepmother was watching coldly. And I'm assuming you would tell me if you had a date. I would like it if you had a date. A 15-year-old girl should have dates. Well, Sarah was thinking, if I did have a date and you are the last person I would tell. What a hammy, no, tacky view of life you do have. She smiled grimly to herself. Perhaps I will have a date, she thought. Perhaps I will. But you will not like it, not one bit, when you see who's dating me. I thought you will see him. All you know about is hearing the front door slam behind me, and you have to sneak to the window as you always do, and poke your nose between those horrid, phony lace curtains you put up there, and you see the taillights of a wicked dove-gray limousine vanish around the corner. And after that, you'll keep seeing pictures in the magazines of the two of us together in Bermuda and St. Tropez and Benares. And there will be nothing at all you could possibly do about it. For all your firm views on bedtimes and developmental psychology and my duties in rolling up the toothpaste tube from the bottom. Oh, stepmother, you're going to be sorry when you read in Vogue about the cosmic cash that Hollywood producers are offering for us. Sarah's father came down the stairs into the hall. In his arms, he was carrying Toby, clad in a red and white striped pajama. He patted the baby's back. Oh, Sarah, he said mildly. You're here at last. We were worried about you. Oh, leave me alone. Afraid that she might be close to tears, Sarah gave them no chance to reason with her. She ran up the stairs. They were always so reasonable, particularly her father, so long-suffering and mild with her, so utterly convinced that they were obviously in the right, and that it was only a matter of time before she consented to do as they wish. Why did her father always take that woman's side? Her mother never wore that look of pain tolerance. She was a woman who... Sorry, my cats are doing something. She was a woman who could shout and laugh and hug you and slap you all within a minute or two. And when she and Sarah had a quarrel, it was an explosion. 5 minutes later, it was forgotten. In the hallway, her stepmother had sat down, still in her fur coat. Wearily, she was saying, I don't know what to do anymore. She treats me like the wicked stepmother from a fairy tale, no matter what I say. I've tried, Robert. Well, Sarah's father patted Toby thoughtfully. It is hard to have your mother walk out on you at that age. At any age, I suppose. And that's what you always say. And you're right, and of course you're right. But she will never change. Will she never change? Holding Toby in one arm, Robert patted his wife on the shoulder. I'll go and talk to her. Thunder rumbled again. A squall of raindrops clattered on the windows. Sarah was in her room. It was the only safe place in the world. She made a point of going all around it each day, checking that everything was just where it had been and should be. Although her stepmother seldom came in there, except to deliver some iron clothes or to give Sarah a message, she was not to be trusted. It would be typical of her to take it into her head to dust the room, even though Sarah made sure that it was kept clean. And then she would be bound to move things around and not put them back where they belong. It was essential to ward off that disturbing spirit. All the books had to remain in their proper positions, in alphabetical order by author, and, with each author's group, in order of acquisition. Other shelves were filled with toys and dolls, and they were positioned according to affinities known only to Sarah. The curtain had to hang exactly so that, when Sarah was lying on the bed, they symmetrically framed the second poplar tree in a line that she could see from the window. The waste paper basket stood so that its base just touched the edge of one particular block on the parquet floor. It would be unsafe if these things were not so. Once let disorder set in, and the room would never be familiar again. People talked about how upsetting it was to be burgled, and Sarah knew just how it must feel, as though some uncaring stranger were fooling around with your most precious soul. The woman who came in to clean 3 times a week knew that she would never do anything to this room. She knew that she was never to do anything to this room. Sarah looked after everything in there herself. She had learned how to fix electric plugs and tighten screws and hang pictures so that her father should have no need to come in except to speak with her. Sarah was now standing in the middle of her room. Her eyes were red. She sniffled and chewed her lower lip. Then she walked over to her dressing table and gazed at a framed photograph. Her father and mother, and herself, aged 10, gazed back at her. Her parents' smile were confident. Her own face in the photograph was, she thought, slightly over the top, grinning too keenly. All around the room, other eyes watched. Photographs and posters displayed her mother in various costumes for various parts. Clippings from Variety were taped to the mirror of the dressing table, praising her mother's performance or announcing others that she would give. On the wall beside the bed was pinned a poster advertising her latest play. In the picture, Sarah's mother and her co-star Jeremy were cheek to cheek, their arms around each other, smiling confidently. The photographer had lit the pair beautifully, showing her to be so pretty, he so handsome, with his blonde hair and a gold chain around his neck. Beneath the picture was a quote from one of the theater critics. "I have seldom felt such warmth irradiating an audience." The poster was signed, with large flourishing signatures. "For darling Sarah, with all my love, Mom." And a different hand, "All good wishes, Sarah, Jeremy." Near the poster were more pressed clippings from different newspapers, arranged in chronological order. In them, the 2 stars could be seen dining together in restaurants, drinking together at parties, and laughing together in a little rowboat. The texts were all the theme of romancing on and off the stage. Still sniffling from time to time, Sarah went to the small table beside her bed and picked up the music box her mother had given her for her 15th birthday. The memory of that gorgeous day was still vivid. A taxi had been sent for her in the morning, but instead of going to her mother's place, it had taken her along the waterfront to where Jeremy and her mother were waiting in Jeremy's old black Mercedes. They went out into the country for lunch beside a swimming pool at some club where Jeremy was a member, and the waiter spoke French. And later, in the pool, Jeremy had clowned around, pretending to drown, to such an effect an elderly man had rung the alarm bell. They had giggled in the car all the way back to town. At her mother's place, Sarah was given Jeremy's present, an evening gown in pale blue. She wore it to go with them to a new musical that evening, and afterward to supper in a dimly lit restaurant. Jeremy was wickedly funny about how every member of the cast they had seen in the musical. Sarah's mother had pretended to disapprove of this scandalous gossip, but it only made Sarah and Jeremy laugh more uncontrollably, and soon all 3 of them had tears in their eyes. Jeremy had danced with Sarah, smiling down at her. He kidded that a flashbolt meant that they'd be all over the gossip columns next morning, and all the way home he drove fast to shake off the photographers, he claimed, grinning. As they said goodnight, her mother gave Sarah a little parcel, wrapped in silver paper and tied with a pale blue bow. Back in her room, Sarah had unwrapped it and found the music box. The tune of Green Sleeves tinkled, and a little dancer in a frilly pink dress twirled in pirouettes. Sarah watched it reverently until it became slow and jerky in motion. Then she put it down and quietly recited a poem she had studied in her English class. "Oh, body sway to music, oh brightening glance, how can we know the dancer from the dance?" It was so easy to learn poetry by heart. She never had any difficulty in remembering those lines whenever she opened the music box. In fact, she reflected, it's easier to remember that than to forget them. So why was she having such trouble learning the speech from the Labyrinth? It was only a game she played. No one was waiting for her to rehearse it. No audience except Merlin, who judged her performance of it. It should have been a piece of cake. She frowned. How could she ever hope to go on stage if she could not remember one speech? She tried again. Through dangers untold and hardships unnumbered, I have fought my way here to the castle beyond the Goblin City to take back the child you have stolen. She paused, her eyes on the poster of her mother in Jeremy's arms, and decided it would help her performance if she prepared for it. If you're going to go into a part, her mother had told her, you have to have the right prop. Costume and makeup and wigs. They were more for the actor's benefit than for the audience. They helped you escape from your own life and find your way into the part, as Jeremy said. And after each show, you take it all off, and you wipe the slate clean. Every day was a fresh start. You could invent yourself again. Sarah took a lipstick from the drawer on her dressing table and put a little on her lips, and rolled them together as her mother did. Her face close to the mirror, she applied a little more to the corners of her mouth. There was a tapping on her door, and her father's voice came from outside. Sarah, can I talk to you? Still looking in the mirror, she replied, There's nothing to talk about. She waited. He would not come in unless she invited him. She imagined him standing there, frowning, rubbing his forehead, trying to think what he ought to say next. Something firm enough to please the woman, but amicable enough to reassure his daughter. You better hurry, Sarah said, if you want to make the show. Toby had his supper, her father's voice said, and he's in bed now. If you could just make sure he goes to sleep all right, we'll be back around midnight. Again, a pause. Then the sound of footsteps walking away, with slowness measured to express a blend of concern and resignation. He had done all that could be expected of him. Sarah turned from the mirror and stared accusingly at the closed door. You really wanted to talk to me, didn't you? She murmured. Practically broke down the door. Once upon a time, he would not have gone out without giving her a kiss. She sniffled. Things certainly has changed in this house. She put the lipstick in her pocket and wiped her lips with the tissue. As she went to throw it in the waste paper basket, something caught her eye. More exactly, something that was not there caught her eye. Lancelot was not there. Rapidly, she rummaged through her shelves of toys and dolls and cuddly things, dogs and monkeys and soldiers and clowns, though she knew it would be fruitless. If the teddy bear was there at all, he would have been at his appointed place. He had gone. The order of the room had been violated. Sarah's cheeks were hot. Someone has been in my room, she thought. Oh, I hate her. Outside, the taxi was pulling away. Sarah heard it and ran to the window. I hate you! She screamed. No one heard her save Merlin, and he could do no more than he was doing already, which was to bark loudly in the garage. She knew where she would find Lancelot. Toby had already everything his little baby heart could desire, and had so much more than Sarah ever had. Yet more was given to him, every day without question. She stormed into the nursery. The teddy bear was spread eagle on the carpet, just tossed away like that. Sarah picked up Lancelot and clutched him to her. Toby, full of warm milk, had been almost asleep in his crib. Sarah's entrance aroused him. She glared at the baby. I hate her. I hate you. Toby started to cry. Sarah shuddered and held Lancelot still more tightly. Oh, she wailed. Oh, someone save me. Take me away from this awful place. Toby was howling now. His face was red. Sarah was wailing. Merlin was barking outside. The storm delivered a lightning flash and clap of thunder directly above the house. It rattled the windows and their frames. Teacups danced in the kitchen cupboard. Someone save me, Sarah begged. Listen, said a goblin, one eye open. All around him, on top of him, beneath him, the nest of goblins stirred sleepily. Another eye opened, and another, all crazed eyes, red and staring. Some of the goblins had horns, some had pointed teeth, some had fingers like claws. Some were dressed in scraps of armor that helmet, a gorget, but all of them had scaly feet, and Hal had baleful eyes. Higgledy-piggledy in a heap they slept, and in their dirty chamber at the castle of the Goblin King. Their eyes went on opening, and their ears pricked up. All right, hush now. Hush. Sarah was trying to calm herself down as much as her baby brother. What do you want, huh? Do you want a story? All right. With barely a moment's thought, she picked up the thread of the labyrinth. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young woman whose stepmother always made her stay with the baby. The baby was a spoiled child who wanted everything for himself, and the young woman was practically a slave girl. But what no one knew was this. The king of the goblins had fallen in love with her and given her certain powers. In the castle, the goblins' eyes opened very wide. They were all at attention. The lightning and thunder crashed again, but both Sarah and Toby had become quieter. One night, Sarah continued, when the baby had been particularly nasty, the girl called upon the goblins to help her, and they said to her, "Say your right words, and we'll take the baby away to the goblin city, and then you'll be free." Those were their words to her. The goblins nodded enthusiastically. Toby was nearly asleep again, with only a light protest remaining on his breath. Sarah, enjoying her own invention, leaned closer to him, over the side of the crib. She was holding her audience in her spell. Lancelot was in her arms. But the girl knew, she went on, that the king of the goblins would keep the baby in his castle forever and ever, and he would turn the baby into a goblin. So she suffered in silence, though many a long month, until one night, worn out by a day of slaving at her housework, and hurt beyond measure by the harsh, ungrateful words of her stepmother, she could bear it no longer. By now, Sarah was leaning so close to Toby that she was whispering into his little pink ear. Suddenly, he turned over in his crib and stared into her eyes, only a couple of inches away. There was a moment of silence. Then Toby opened his mouth and began to howl loudly and incessantly. "Oh!" Sarah snorted in disgust, standing up straight again. The thunder rolled, and Marlin gave it all he had. Sarah sighed, frowned, shrugged, and decided that there was no way around it. She picked up Toby and walked around the room, joggling him in her arms, together with Lancelot. The small bedside light threw a dim shadow on the wall, huge and flickering. "All right," she said. "All right. Come on now, rock my baby and all that stuff. Come on, Toby, knock it off." Toby wasn't going to knock it off just for begging, just for being jogged. He felt he had a serious grievance to express. "Toby," his sister said sternly, "be quiet, will you? Please, or..." Her voice lowered. "Or I'll say the words." She looked up quickly at the shadows on the walls and addressed them theatrically. No, I mustn't say. I wish. "Listen," said the goblin again. Every glowing eye in the nest, every ear was open now. A second goblin spoke. "She's going to say it." "Say what?" asked the stupid goblin. "Shush!" The first goblin was straining to hear Sarah. "You shut up," said the stupid goblin. In the hubbub, the first goblin thought he would go crazy with trying to hear her. "Shush, shush!" He put his hand over the mouth of the stupid goblin. The second goblin shrieked, "Quiet!" and thumped those nearest to him. "Listen!" The first goblin admonished the rest. "Hello, Beans. Thank you for rubbing all up on my mic." "No, don't step on the keyboard!" Oh, God. What is it with my cats and stepping on the keyboard of my computer? They both do it, and I don't know why. My goodness. Alright. "Listen!" The first goblin admonished the rest. "She's going to say the words!" And the rest of them managed to silence themselves. They listened intently to Sarah. She was standing erect. Toby had reached such a crescendo of his screaming, red in the face, that he could scarcely draw breath. His body was straining against Sarah's arms with the effort he was making. Lancelot had fallen to the floor again. Sarah closed her eyes and quivered. "I can bear it no longer!" she exclaimed, and held the howling baby above her head, like a sacrificial offering. She started to intone. Goblin King, wherever you may be, come and take this child of mine far away from me. Lightning cracked, thunder crashed. The goblins dropped their heads, crestfallen. That's not right, the first goblin said witheringly. Where did she learn that rubbish? The second scoffed. It doesn't even start with I wish. Shh, said a third goblin, seizing his chance to boss the others. Sarah was still holding Toby above her head. Outraged by that, Toby was screaming even more loudly than before, which Sarah would have not thought possible. She brought him down and cuddled him, which had the effect of restoring him to his standard level of screaming. Exhausted by now, Sarah told him, "Oh, Toby, stop it, you little monster. Why should I have to put up with this? You're not even my responsibility. I want to be free to enjoy myself. Stop it! Oh, I wish. Anything would be preferable to this cauldron of noise, anger and guilt, and weariness in which she found herself. With a tired little sob, she said, I wish I did know what words to say to get the goblins to take you away. So where's the problem? The first goblin said with an impatient sigh. Pedantically, he spelled it out. I guess the goblins would come and take you away right now. That's not so hard, is it? In the nursery, Sarah was saying, I wish. The goblins were all alert again, biting their lips with tension. Did she say it? The stupid goblin asked brightly. As one, the rest of them turned on him. Shut up, they said irritably. Toby's tornado had blown itself out. He was breathing deeply with a whimper at the end of each breath. His eyes were closed. Sarah put him back in the crib, none too gently, and tucked him in. She walked quietly to the door and was shutting it behind her when he uttered an eerie shriek and started to scream again. He was hoarse now, and louder in consequence. Sarah froze with her hand on the handle. She moaned helplessly. I wish the goblins would come and take you away. She paused. The goblins were so still, you could have heard a snail blink. Right now, said Sarah. In the goblin's nest, there was an exhalation of pleasure. She said it! In a trice, all the goblins had vanished in a different direction, save only for the stupid one. He squatted there, a grin dawning on his face until he realized that the rest of them had left him. Hey, he said, wait for me! And he tried to run in several directions at once. Then he too vanished. Lightning flashed and thunder hammered in the air. Toby gave out with a high-pitched screech, and Merlin barked as if all the burglars in the world were closing in. Oh. Chapter 2. What's said is said. The storm raged on over Sarah's house. The clouds boiled. Rain lashed the leaves on the trees. Thunder was followed by lightning. Sarah was listening. What she was listening to was an unusual silence within the room. Toby had stopped crying so suddenly that it scared her. She looked back inside the nursery. The bedside light was out. Toby? She called. He did not respond. She flicked the light switch beside the door. Nothing happened. She jiggled it up and down several times to no effect. A board creaked. Toby, are you alright? Why aren't you crying? She stepped nervously into the quiet room. The light from the landing, coming through the doorway, threw unfamiliar shadows onto the walls and across the carpet. In the lull between two thunderclaps, she thought she heard a humming in the air. She could detect no movement at all in the crib. Toby, she whispered in anxiety, and walked towards the crib with her breath drawn. Her hands were shaking like aspen leaves. She reached out to pull the sheet back. She recoiled. The sheet was convulsing. Weird shapes were thrusting and bulging beneath it. She thought she glimpsed things poking out from the edge of the sheet, things that were not a part of Toby. She felt her heart thumping, and she put her hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Then the sheet was still again. It sank slowly down over the mattress. Nothing moved. She could not turn and run away and leave him. She had to know. Whatever the horror of it, she had to know. Impulsively, she reached out her hand and pulled the sheet back. The crib was empty. For a moment or an hour, she would never know how long, she stared at the empty crib. She was not even frightened. Her mind had been wiped clean. And then she was frightened by a soft, rapid thumping on the window pane. Her hands clenched so tightly her fingernails scored her skin. A white owl was flapping incessantly on the glass. She could see the light from the landing reflected in its great round dark eyes, watching her. The whiteness of its plumage was illuminated by a series of lightning flashes that seemed continuous. Behind her, a goblin briefly raised his head and ducked down again. Another did likewise. She didn't see them. Her eyes were fixed on the owl's eyes. Lightning crackled and flashed again, and this time it distracted her attention from the window by shining on the clock that stood in the mantelpiece. She saw that the hands were at 13 o'clock. She was staring distractedly at the clock when she felt something nudge her back of her legs. She glanced down. The crib was moving across the carpet on scaly legs, like a lizard's, with talons for toes. One leg at each corner of the crib. Sarah's lips parted, but she made no sound. Is this an Owl City book? This is actually Labyrinth! This is actually the novelization of the movie Labyrinth. It's actually really good. I hope you're enjoying it, Wasabi Man. Hi, good morning. Good morning, my friend. I'm happy that you're here. Yes, this is the novelization of Labyrinth. The fun little movie from the starred David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly and... yeah! So there won't be 1,000 fireflies? No. Probably not. Alright. Let me continue. Thank you for being here. Behind her, something snickered. She spun around and saw it duck down again behind the chest of drawers. Shadows were scuttling across the walls. Goblins were prancing and bobbling behind her. Sarah was watching the chest of drawers. Like the crib, it had scaly clawed feet at each corner. And it was dancing. She wheeled around, mouth open, hands clenched, and saw the goblins cavorting. They ducked away into the shadows to evade her eyes. She looked for something that would serve as a weapon. In the corner of the nursery was an old broom. She took it and advanced upon the goblins. Go away, she whimpered, trying to sweep them up, but the handle of the broom twisted in her hand and slithered out of her grasp. The storm wind rose to a pitch. Lightning made daylight in the room, and scared faces suddenly began to vanish into cupboards, drawers, or down to the cracks between the floorboards. As the thunder boomed and the wind shook the curtains, a blast of air blew the window open. Between the fluttering curtains, the white owl entered. Sarah wrapped her arms around her face and screamed again. She was petrified that the flapping owl would brush across her. She thought she would die if it did. She felt the wind blowing her hair around, but the flapping had ceased. Between her fingers she peeked out to see where the bird had perched. Perhaps it had flown out again. A prolonged crackling of lightning was throwing a giant shadow on the wall facing the window. It was the shadow of a human figure. Sarah spun around. Silhouetted against the stormy sky was a man. He wore a cloak which swirled in the wind. She could see that his hair was shoulder-length and blonde. Something glinted about his neck. More than that she could not see in the dim light. She said, and cleared her throat. Who are you? Don't you know? The man's voice was calm, almost kindly. Lightning. He was not smiling, as one might smile on greeting a stranger, nor was his expression fierce. His eyes were fixed upon Sarah's with an intensity she found compelling. When he took a step towards her and saw the light shining from the doorway, she did not retreat. If his eyes had not hypnotized her, the gold chain around his neck might have. A sickle-shaped ornament hung from it upon his chest. His shirt was cream-colored, open at the front, loose-sleeved, with silken cuffs at the wrist. Over he wore a tight black waistcoat. He was shod in black boots and wore grey tights, and on his hands were black gloves. With one of them he held a jeweled knob of a curious cane with a fishtail shape at the end. Sarah answered. The humming that she had thought she heard in the air was now quite distinct and musical. The stranger smiled at her hesitancy. He was certainly handsome. She had not expected that. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper. You're him, aren't you? You're the king of the goblins. He bowed. Jareth. She resisted the ridiculous impulse to return a curtsy. I have saved you, he said. I have liberated you from those bonds that distressed you and frightened you. You are free now, Sarah. Oh no! I don't want to be free, she answered. I mean I do, but I want my little brother back. Please. She gave him a tiny smile. If it's all the same to you. Jareth folded his hands on top of his cane. What's said is said. But I didn't mean it, Sarah replied quickly. Didn't you now? Oh, please, where is he? Jareth chuckled. You know very well where he is. Please bring him back, please. She heard herself speaking in a small voice. Please. Sarah. Jareth frowned and shook his head. His expression was all concern for her. Go back to your room. Read your books. Put on your costumes. That is your real life. Forget about the baby. No, I can't. For a moment, they regarded each other, adversaries trying to size each other up on the outset of a long contest. Thunder rumbled. Then Jareth raised his left arm and made a gesture with his hand. Sarah looked around, thinking that he was summoning assistance. When she faced him again, a glowing crystal had appeared in his hand. I brought you a gift, Sarah, he said, holding it out to her. She paused. She knew she could not trust him. What is it? A crystal, nothing more, except that if you look into it, it will show you your dreams. Sarah's lips parted involuntarily. With a teasing smile, Jareth washed her face while he spun the shining crystal around in his fingers. Her hand started to reach for it. He smiled a little more and withdrew the crystal from her. Raising the cane with his other hand, he told her, "This is not a gift for an ordinary girl, one who takes care of a screaming baby." His voice was quieter now, and huskier. "Do you want it, Sarah?" He held it out towards her again. This time her hands remained by her side, and she made no answer. Her eyes were fixed on the dancing, flashing glints of the crystal. To see her own dreams, what wouldn't she give for that? Then forget the child, Jareth said firmly. While Sarah hesitated, another bolt of thunder and lightning illuminated the sky behind the Goblin King. She was torn. The gift was not only seductive, it was also the choice of someone who understood her, someone who cared about the secret places of her imagination and knew how infinitely much more they meant to her than anything else. In return, she would have to trade her responsibility for an offensively spoiled child. He made endless demands upon her and never showed her the least sign of gratitude, who was, after all, only her half-brother. The crystal was spinning, glowing. She willed her eyes to close. From behind shut eyelids, she heard her voice answering. It was her own voice, but it seemed like a memory. I can't. It isn't that I don't appreciate what you're trying to do for me, but I want my baby brother back. He must be so scared. She opened her eyes again. Jareth snorted and tossed his mane of blonde hair back. He had lost patience with the girl. With a wave of his hand, he extinguished the crystal. And with another wave, he plucked a live snake from the air. He held it with a straight arm in front of him, so that it writhed and hissed near Sarah's face. And he threw it at her. Don't define me, he warned her. It was wrapped around her neck. She clutched at it desperately at the thing, and found that it was now a silk scarf. She pulled it off, looked at it, and the snake came leaping out of the scarf. She yelled, dropping it and jumping away. When it hit the floor, it shattered into a number of horribly ugly little goblins who scuttled, snickering at the corners of the room. Other goblins crept up from the shadows or popped out from their hiding places and stood all around the room, brazen now, to watch and see what their king will do next. You are no match for me, Sarah. Sheriff sounded impatient. Let the child alone. Take my gift. I will not offer it to you again. Before he produced the crystal, Sarah told him no. She paused. Thank you all the same, but I can't do what you want. Can't you see that? I must have my brother back. You will never find him. Ah, Sarah said and took a deep breath. Then there is a place to look. Just for a moment, Jera's face flinched. Sarah saw it in the merest trace of fear fleeting across his eyes. Was it possible? His nostrils tightened. He gripped his cane, and he appeared to hesitate slightly before answering her. She could not quite believe it, but the suspicion that the Goblin King could be afraid of her, even if only momentarily, was encouraging. Yes, he said, there is a place. And now, with a really hammy gesture straight out of vaudeville, he twirled his hands and pointed through the window. There. Lightning and thunder, right on cue, she thought. She moved past him and stared into the night. On a distant hill, brilliant in the flash, she saw a castle. Sorry, I thought I heard my cats knocking something over. I think they did. Oh no. I'll check it later. Let's see. On a distant hill, brilliant in the flashes, she saw a castle. She leaned on the windowsill, trying to see more clearly. There were towers or turrets, massive walls, spires and domes, a portcullis and a drawbridge. The whole edifice was built on top of a sharply rising mound. Around it, the lightning flickered and forked like snakes' tongues. Beyond was blackness. From just behind her shoulder, Jairus murmured, "Do you still want to look for him?" "Yes," she swallowed. Is that..." She remembered the words. "The castle beyond the Goblin City?" Jairus did not answer at once, and she turned around. He was still there, watching her intensely, but they were no longer in the house. They stood facing each other on a windswept hilltop. Between them and the hill on which the castle stood was a broad valley. In the darkness, she could not tell what was down there. She turned again. The wind blew her hair over her face. Brushing it back, she took one timid step forward. Jared's voice came from behind her. "Turn back, Sarah. Turn back before it's too late." I can't! Don't you understand that? She shook her head slowly, gazing at the distant castle, and to herself quietly repeated, "I can't." What a pity. Jared's voice was low and gentle, as though he really meant it. She was looking at the castle. It seemed to be a long way off, but not impossibly far to travel, dependent on what she would encounter in the valley, how easily it could be crossed. Was the darkness down there perpetual? "It doesn't look that far," she said, and heard in her voice with the effort she was making to sound brave. Jared was at her elbow now. He looked at her with a smile that was icy. "It's farther than you think." Pointing at a tree, he added, "And the time is shorter." Sarah saw that an antique wooden clock had appeared in the tree, as though growing from the branch. On it was marked the hours to 13, as on the nursery clock in the lightning. "You have 13 hours to unriddle the labyrinth," Jareth told her, "before your baby brother becomes one of us." "Us?" Jareth nodded. "Forever." Magic still hummed in the air. Sarah was standing still, hair tossing in the wind, looking out across the valley towards the castle. After a while, she said, "Tell me where I start." She waited for an answer, and finally heard him say, "A pity." "What?" She turned her head to look up at him, but he was not there. She spun all around. He had vanished. She was alone in the night on a windswept hilltop. She looked across again at the castle. The storm was passing away. Blades of cloud sliced across the moon. She thought she glimpsed the figure of an owl high above, wings spread wide on the air, as he flew steadily away from her. She took another step forward, down the hillside, but there was no ground beneath her feet. She began to fall. Those rascals. Yes, those rascals indeed. My silly little kitties. They get to all sorts of shenanigans. Chapter 3, Pipsqueak. Sorry, I got allergies. You guys are gonna be hearing me all through the spring season. I'm gonna just be sniffling a lot. Cause springtime allergies are the worst. Even with medication, it's still the worst. But so I apologize well in advance for that. Sarah felt herself toppling forward into the darkness. Only by swinging her arms wildly did she manage to keep her balance. Invest in some corks, then I won't be able to breathe. I don't think I want to do that, Wasabi. I don't think I want to do that. Let's see. Sarah felt herself toppling forward into the darkness. Only by swinging her arms wildly did she manage to keep her balance. The hillside was very steep. Her mouth had gone dry with fright. Carefully, she sat down. That felt safer, but she could not afford to sit there long, with only 13 hours to get through the labyrinth and find Toby in the castle. She tried slithering down the hillside on her bottom, but that was no good either. Rocks and little shrubs impeded her, and she dared not stand up to get past them. It was so black, she might have been trying to find her way through a sea of ink. She felt tears rising, but blinked them away. She would do it. There were no limits to what she could do, given the determination, which she certainly had, and the ingenuity, which she never lacked yet, admittedly, in more humdrum predicaments, and maybe a little luck, which she deserved, didn't she? She would do it, she vowed, as she sat on the black hillside with no idea how to move another foot. High above her, where the owl had flown, she heard a lark sing. She peered up at it, and by taking her eyes off the blackness below, she became aware that a hint of light was staining the rim of the dark sky. She watched the light grow brighter, changing from red to pink, and then pale blue. And when she saw the edge of the sun inch up over the horizon, she shut her eyes and took a deep breath. She felt the sun warming her skin. She would do it. When she opened her eyes again, Jareth's castle was shining before her, its spires and turrets rimmed with reflecting sunlight. Anxiously, she scrutinized the valley, which, like a developing photograph, took longer to reveal itself. The first thing she could gauge was its width. The extent of land between herself and the castle was not so very great. I can run that far in a couple of hours, she reckoned. It's only a few miles. Jareth was trying to hoax me. He thought I'd be so scared of the dark that I would give up and forget about Toby. How could I? Anyway, in 13 hours, I could be there and back with time to spare. She wondered if 13 hours in Jareth's land would take the same time to pass as at home. If so, what would her father and stepmother think when they returned? They would probably call the police. Well, there was nothing she could do about that. She did not expect to find a telephone in Jareth's castle. She smiled wanly. The sun was above the horizon, and color and shape were seeping into the valley. There was an awful lot of stuff down there. She could tell that much. She went on watching, and gradually she took in the full nature of the valley. At first, she could not believe it. As the sun rose higher and disclosed more to her, her shoulders drooped and her face lost its smile. She shook her head slowly, dumbfounded. From the foot of the hillside where she sat, to the castle and beyond it, from the horizon to horizon on each side, there stretched a vast, intricate maze of walls and hedges. The labyrinth, she whispered. So that's the labyrinth. She studied it, trying to decipher some pattern to it, some principle of design that might guide her through it. She could see none. Corridors doubled and wound and Excuse me. Oh my gosh, excuse me. She studied it, trying to decipher some pattern to it. Some principle of design that might guide her through it. She could see none. Corridors doubled and wound and coiled. Gateways led to gateways, leading to gateways. It reminded her of thousands of fingerprints laid side by side, overlapping each other. Did someone work all that out, she wondered? Or had it just happened? The impossibility of ever finding her way to the labyrinth started to overwhelm her. She stood up, clenched her fists, her jaws set and cleared her throat. Well, she said, here we go. Come on, feet. In the dawning light, she could see below her a path that zigzagged down the hillside. She picked her way to it through the rocks and shrubs. At the foot of the path, she came to a great wall, strengthened with buttresses. It stretched as far as she could see to the left and right. Doubtfully, she approached the wall, with no idea what she might do when she reached it. As she got closer, a movement just at the base of it caught her eye. There was a little man. He was cackling as he was grinding something underfoot. Excuse me, Sarah said. The little man nearly jumped out of his skin. Just going, he said, before he even looked around to see who it was. When he did turn, he had his face down so that he regarded her from under his thick, bushy eyebrows. Well, he exclaimed, looking cross and astonished at the same time. Well, it seemed that he had never set eyes on a person like Sarah before. Perhaps that it was no person like Sarah that ever caught him unawares. Well, he said again. We'll never get anywhere like this, Sarah thought. He was an odd little person. His sprouting eyebrows clearly wanted to be fierce, but his wrinkled face couldn't live up to the ferocity. His expression was wary now, not particularly friendly, but not hostile either. He seemed to be avoiding her eyes, and she noticed that whenever she moved her hands, his gaze would follow them. On top of his head, he wore a skull cap. From the belt that held his breeches up, he had a chain of ornaments dangling costume jewelry as far as she could tell. She saw his mouth moving to say, well, again, and interrupted quickly. Excuse me, but I have to go through the labyrinth. Can you show me the way in? His mouth froze at the formation of a W. He blinked at her once or twice. Then his eyes darted to one side. He rushed a few steps towards the bluebell, at the same time pulling a spray can from under his jacket. As he aimed to spray, Sarah saw that words are hard, y'all. Sarah saw that a defiant little fairy was emerging from the bluebell. He sprayed it with a couple of quick bursts. The fairy at once wilted like a shriveled petal. 57, he said with some satisfaction. Sarah was shocked. Oh, how could you? He answered with a grunt. She ran to where the fairy was lying on the ground, wings quivered and shriveled. Poor thing, she exclaimed. She picked it up gently in her fingertips and turned it accusingly to the fairy slayer. You monster! She felt a sharp pain, as if from broken glass. The fairy had bitten her finger. Oh! She dropped the fairy and stuck her finger in her mouth. It bit me, she murmured around her finger. Of course she did, said the little man chuckled. What do you expect fairies to do? Sarah was frowning, perplexed. I thought they did, well, nice things, like granting wishes. Ha! His eyebrows went up and he chortled. Shows what you know, then, don't it? He raised his spray can and casually hit another bluebell with it. A second shimmering fairy fell down, turning brown like a leaf in autumn. 58, he said, and shook his head. They breathe as fast as I can spray. Sarah was still wincing as she sucked her finger. Oh, she complained. It hurts. She took her finger from her mouth and shook it. She walked to a plant nearly as tall as he was. Oh, he walked to a plant nearly as tall as he was, tore off one of its broad, grayish leaves and handed it to her. Here, he told her. Rub that on it. She gratefully did what he told her. No sooner had she started rubbing it that she dropped the leaf, clasped her fingers with the other hand, and hopped around in pain. Ow! She shouted. That makes it so much worse! Ow! 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 He was holding his sides with his pudgy little hands and roaring with laughter. Course it do. Fancy rubbing one of them on a fairy bite? You don't know nothing, don't you? Do you? Her face screwed up with pain. Sarah answered indignantly. I thought you were giving it to me to make it better. Ow! Ow! You thought that too, didn't you? You got a lot of opinions. He chuckled. All of them wrong. And you've got grass all over the seat of your trousers. In spite of the pain in her finger, she had to glance over her shoulder and saw that he was right. It was from sliding down the hillside. Brushing off what she could, she realized that he was paying her back for having caught him unawares. You're horrible, she told him. No, I'm not. He sounded surprised. I'm Hoggle. Who are you? Sarah. He nodded. That's what I thought. Spotting another fairy, he squirted her. To make sure, he stepped on this one and ground his foot around. The fairy squealed. 59, said Hoggle. Sarah was thinking, still sucking on her finger. He seemed to know about her, so he must have something to do with Jareth, mustn't he? Some kind of spy, maybe. Well, maybe. He was not her idea of a spy. Spies weren't grumpy. They didn't play mean tricks on you. Did they? If all her opinions were wrong, as he'd said, then this one might be wrong too. But in that case, she thought, supposing he is a spy, then it might be his job to persuade me that all my opinions are wrong when they really are all correct. And if they're all correct, then he's not a spy. But that would mean he has no motive for persuading me that I am wrong about everything. And so probably I am wrong about this too, and supposing he is a spy. Oh, she exclaimed in exasperation. It was one of those drawings that she had seen in a book at home, where the water seems to be flowing uphill, and yet you can never put your finger on just where the drawing is telling you to lie. Hoggle tore a leaf from a different plant and offered it to her, with a sort of twinkling scowl on his face. She took her finger from her mouth. The pain was easing now. She shook her head and had to smile at that little funny, wizened face of his. His expression in answer went dark again. He looked at her mistrustfully. He was not used to being smiled at. Well, she thought, there's nothing else to do. Whether or not he is here to spy on me, he's the only person I can ask for help. So she tried. Do you know where the door to the labyrinth is? He screwed up his face. Maybe. Alright. Where is it? Instead of replying, he dodged to one side, raising his spray can. 60. It said, where is it? Where is what? The door. What door? The door to the labyrinth. The door into the labyrinth? Oh, that's a good one, he laughed, not kindly. Sarah wanted to punch him. It's hopeless asking you anything. Not if you ask the right questions. He was giving her a sidelong look. You're as green as a cucumber. Well, what are the right questions? Hoggle stroked the top of his nose. It depends on what you want to know. That's easy. How do I get into the labyrinth? Hoggle sniffed. His eyes twinkled. Ah, now that's more like it. She thought he had heard the music in the air again. The magic music that hummed around the Goblin King. You gets in there, he nodded, indicating behind her. You got to ask the right questions if you want to get anywhere in the labyrinth. Sarah spun around. Now, in the great wall, she saw a huge, grotesquely designed gate. She stared at it almost accusingly. She could have sworn it had not been there before. There ain't no door, see? Hoggle was explaining. All you got to do now is find the key. She looked back at him and then all around her. She saw at once that this was going to be no problem to find the key. Near her was a very small mat, and from each end of it an enormous key was sticking out. Well, she said, that's simple enough. She went over to the key and tried to pick it up. She could just manage to get one end of it off the ground, or the other, but the whole key was too heavy for her to lift up into the keyhole in the gate. She glared at Hoggle. I suppose it's too much to expect you to give me a hand. Yes, said Hoggle. She tried again, straining to lift it. It was hopeless. Oh, this is so stupid, she said. You mean you're so stupid, Hoggle corrected her. Shut up, you rotten little pipsqueak. Don't call me that, Hoggle said. Hoggle was agitated. I am not a pipsqueak. Yes, you are, said Sarah. She was uneasily reminded of herself at a much younger age, at school, chanting cruel jibes at some tormented girl. But she persisted. Yes, you are. Rotten, nasty little ugly pipsqueak. Hoggle was beside himself with rage. Don't call me that, he said hysterically. You, ha! You're stupid, you are. Take everything for granted. Pipsqueak, pipsqueak. Am not. Stop it. Nasty, creepy little pipsqueak. Hoggle collected himself and with some dignity told her, if you weren't so brainless, you'd try the gate. That stopped her short. She thought for a moment, and then went to the gate and gave it a little push. It swung open. Nobody said it was locked, Hoggle observed. Very clever. You think you're so clever, said Hoggle. You know why? Because you ain't learning nothing. Sarah was peering cautiously inside the gate. She did not like what she saw. It was dark and forbidding in there. The music humming in the air seemed to be more intense. There was a smell of things rotting. She gathered her courage and took 2 steps into the labyrinth. Then she stopped short. A passageway ran across the entrance. It was so narrow and the walls were so high that the sky was a mere slit over her head. In the gloom, she heard a continual drip of water, echoing. She approached the farther wall and touched it and pulled her hand away. It was dank and slimy, like mildew. Hoggle's head was poking through the gateway behind her. Cozy, ain't it? Sarah shuddered. Hoggle's manner had altered. He was quiet, and it was almost possible to detect a hint of concern in his voice. You're really going to go in there, aren't you? Sarah hesitated. Yes, she said. Yes, I am. Is there a reason why I shouldn't? She clenched her fists. It did seem such a dreadfully gloomy place inside the gate. There's every reason why you shouldn't, Hoggle replied. Is there any reason why you should? Any good reason? Yes, there is, she paused. So, I suppose I must. All right, Hoggle said, in a tone of voice that implied, you're on your own. On your own head it be. Now, he asked, which way will you go? Right or left? She looked one way and then the other. There's no reason to choose either one or the other. Both look grim. The brick walls appeared to extend to infinity. She shrugged, wanting some help but too proud to ask for it. They both look the same, she said. Well, Hoggle told her, you're not going to get very far then, are you? All right, she said crossly. Which way would you go? Me? He laughed without mirth. I wouldn't go neither way. Some guide you are. Never said I was a guide, did I? Although you could certainly use one. You'll probably end up back where you started, given your record for being wrong. Well, Sarah snapped at him, if that's all the help you're going to be, you might as well let me get on with it. You know your problem? Hoggle asked. She took no notice, but tried to look determined to set out in one direction or the other. Left, right, she was thinking. That was the normal order. So in this abnormal place, she might as well try going to the right, mightn't she? I told you, you take too many things for granted, Hoggle went on. This labyrinth, for instance. Even if you get to the center, which is extremely doubtful, you'll never get out again. Well, that's your opinion. Sarah moved to her right. Well, it's a better opinion than any of yours. Thanks for nothing, Hogwart. Hoggle! His voice came echoing from the gateway, where he remained. And don't say I didn't warn you. Her jaw set, she strode out, between the damp and dire walls. She had gone only a few strides when, with a mighty reverberating clang, the gate closed behind her. She stopped. It could not resist returning to see if the gate would open again. It wouldn't. Hoggle was shut outside. The only sound in the labyrinth now was a drip of water and Sarah's quickening breath. Chapter 4. Which is Which? Sarah took a deep breath and set off along the passageway again. A clump of lichen on the gatepost opened its eyes and watched her go. The eyes, on tendrils, had an anxious look, and when she had gone some distance away, the clump swiveled its eyes towards each other, commenced to gossip amongst itself. Most of it disapproved of the direction she had taken. You could tell that from the way the eyes looked meaningfully into each other. Lichen know about directions. And she had been walking for a while between the towering walls of the apparently endless passageway, and gotten nowhere that looked different. She went on walking for a while more, and it was all the same. Another 100 steps, she told herself, and if I'm getting nowhere, I'll think of something else to do. 1, 2, 98, 99. The walls stretched to eternity. Is this what a labyrinth is? She said aloud, for the company of hearing her own voice. It's not a single turn or corner or anything. It just goes on and on. She paused, thinking of what Hoggle had said to her. But maybe it doesn't, she reasoned. Maybe I'm just taking it for granted that it does. Because it's all it's done so far, go on and on. It could do that forever, and I haven't got forever. She wished she knew how much of the 13 hours remained to her. It wasn't fair not knowing. Taking another deep breath, she began to run. The only difference now was that the walls revealed their endlessness more quickly. She ran faster, skidding in mud, banging against the brick sides of the passage, faster and faster, and the walls stretched out ahead of her without turning, or feature, or end. Until they began to spin above her head, and she realized that she was collapsing, exhausted, tears running down her cheeks. She laid in a heap, sobbing. A clump of lichen nearby stared down at her sympathetically, its eyes boggling. When she had recovered, she opened her eyes very slowly, hoping she would see something different this time. A corner, a door, even her own bedroom. All there was to see were the two walls. With a little yelp of frustration, she beat her fist upon one of the walls. As though answering a doorbell, a tiny worm-like creature with large eyes popped its head out from between the bricks where Sarah had pounded. "Hello?" it said in a cheery voice. Woe begone, Sarah looked at the worm. A talking worm, she reflected. Yes, I should never have taken it for granted that a worm can't talk. She shrugged. If a worm could talk, perhaps I could give her some advice. In a low voice, she asked, Do you know how to get through the labyrinth?" "Who, me?" it grinned. "No, I'm just a worm." Sarah nodded. She might have expected as much. "Come inside and meet the missus," the worm invited her. She managed a faint smile. "Thank you," she told the worm, "but I've got to get through the labyrinth, and there are no turnings or openings or anything." She blinked away hot tears. "It just goes on and on." "Oh," the worm said. "You ain't looking right. You ain't. It's full of openings. It's just that you ain't seen them, that's all." Sarah gazed around in disbelief. The wall stretched away forever on either side. There was no logic to it. Or maybe there was nothing but logic, and that was the trouble. All logic and no reason. "There's an opening just across there," the worm went on. "It's right in front of you." She looked. Brick wall, damp mildew, clump of lichen. Nothing else. "No, there isn't." The worm sniffed, and in a kind voice said, "Come in and have a nice cup of tea." "There isn't an opening," Sarah's voice was insistent. "You try walking that way over there," the worm said, with a nod of encouragement. "You'll see. But first, why not have a nice cup of tea?" Where? Sarah looked at the blank wall again. I got the kettle all. The worm's hospitality was wasted on her. That's just a wall, she murmured. There's no way through. Oh, the worm observed. This place, oh dear. Things aren't always what they seem, you know. Not here. Not here, no. So don't you take anything for granted. Sarah gave the worm a sharp glance. How was it that he had the same script as Hoggle? In her mind, she heard Hoggle's voice again. Me, I would go neither way. Neither way. Right in front of you. What else was there to do? She would try it. Very tentatively, flinching in anticipation, she walked into the wall and threw it into another passageway. Sarah was delighted. This passage, too, stretched out infinitely to either side, but at least it was a different one. She turned back gratefully. Thank you, she said to the worm. That was incredibly helpful. She had begun to walk along the new passageway when she heard a little shout from behind her. Don't go that way! The worm was calling. He looked up at the lichen, whose eyes were worried as they watched Sarah. The worm gave the lichen a cheerful grin, but the lichen just went on boggling anxiously after the girl. She halted and then came back panting. What did you say? What I said, the worm told her, was don't go that way. Oh, Sarah nodded. Thanks. And she then set off in the other direction. The lichen watched her go again and sighed with relief. Whew, the worm rolled his eyes. That was a close one. If she had gone the other way, she had walked straight into that dreadful castle. In the stone chamber of the Goblin King, Toby, still in his red and white striped pajamas, had his mouth wide open and was howling. His little fists were clenched tight. His face was scarlet. His eyes were shut. And he was putting out a din that would have made Sarah groan aloud. Jareth watched him with an amused smile. In that place, no one else took much notice of Toby. Horned or hairy or helmeted goblins racketed around the place, across the filthy floor, over the steps of the throne, up on the ledges of the room, some chasing chickens or a black pig in a helmet, some squabbling over a tidbit, or some peering into a vessel in the hopes of finding something to eat, some just sitting and gnawing on bones, others staring balefully at the rest of them through crazed eyes. The place was littered with half-finished plates of food, and rotting bits of meat and vegetable matter, garbage and junk. A small pterodactyl flapped around, taking its chances. The curved crown, mounted heraldically above the throne, decorated with ram's horns, had been appropriated by a vulture for its nest, or perhaps Jareth had installed the vulture there for his own amusement. He needed something to keep him amused here. Goblins were, frankly, a bore. They were so stupid that they couldn't find their own way through the labyrinth. They were without wisdom or wit. Excuse me. In the old days, when many babies had been offered to him, Jareth had been more tolerant, reckoning that soon he would certainly find one who could be trained as a worthy companion to the throne, one whose young blood would serve to refresh Jareth's, whose high spirits would dispel the thoughts of aging that oppressed the king of goblins. As calls upon him to steal a child became rarer, so Jareth sank deeper into dejection. He avoided mirrors and reflecting water. He could feel that the corners of his mouth had tightened, and he needed no proof of the wrinkles that creased his brow, but he did not deliberately narrow his eyes to taunt his skin. Lodging in his draped throne, which was in the form of an interrupted circle, Jareth looked at the bawling figure of Toby. With any luck, he might grow up to be an intelligent goblin. He might make some jokes, or anyway see the point of Jareth. He might be of some help in ruling this ramshackle empire. At the very least, he might have some fresh ideas about mischief. Two-headed sheep, curdled milk, banging pants, snatched nightclothes, barren fruit trees, shifted tables, moldy bread. Jareth has seen it all, much too often. But this lot, rooting and pratfalling all around all day, still found such childhood cliches a perfect riot every time. Pitiful they were. Jareth yawned and looked wearily around the room. The walls had been decorated with skulls and bats. Dear God, he thought. Skulls and bats, yet how jejune can you get? He looked around hopefully at the clock. 3:30, the sword-shaped hands indicated. Another 9.5 hours to wait, until the goblin striker struck the 13. He would have to do something to pass the time. He stood up from the throne, stretched his arms and paced restlessly. Another goblin came dashing past. Jareth reached down and picked him up by the scruff of his neck. Goblin's eyes boggled at his. You're a boggling goblin, Jareth said, with a forced laugh. The rest of the goblins howled with merriment. Jareth had been their king for as long as they could remember, which is about 4 seconds at best, and they hoped he would be king forevermore. Jareth winced at the pain of it all. Sarah was wandering along the brick corridors. They were still high and forbidding, but at least it had stretched out to the end of space and time, and sometimes there was a flight of steps, which made a nice change. Whenever she came to a fork or a turning and made a big choice, she had found a sensible way of ensuring that she did not wander in circles. With the lipstick she had put in her pocket at home, she made an arrow on the brick at each junction to show where she had come from, and whenever she put the lipstick away and walked down the new corridor, the little creature would lift the marked brick, turn it upside down and replace it, but the arrow was not visible. After she had marked 18 arrows, a piece of the lipstick broke off, and she was doing the next one. Determined to remain calm, she screwed another length out, and went on her chosen way, up some steps, into a chamber. Across the end of the passage behind her, a squad of goblins rustled by, but Sarah's eyes were fixed on what lay ahead, and she did not see them. The chamber was a dead end. She peeked in every alcove and behind the buttresses, but there was definitely no way out. She shrugged and retraced her steps to the 19th arrow. When she reached the corner, she looked for her arrow and could not see it. That's odd, she thought. I'm sure it was right here, at this corner, on that brick there. The bricks were blank. She frowned and looked about her. On the floor, she spotted the broken-off piece of lipstick. She looked again, hard, and could not see no arrows. And still could see no arrows. That proved it, then. Something fishy was going on. She threw down the rest of the lipstick. Someone's been rubbing out my marks, she said, loudly, certain that the culprit must be close enough to hear her. What a horrid place this is. It's not fair. That's right, a voice said behind her. It's not fair. She jumped and looked around. Behind her in the chamber that had been a dead end, she now saw 2 carved doors in the wall, and a guard posted in front of each door. At least, she thought, they must be guards, since they stood 4 square and were emblazoned with armor. But as she studied them, she was not so sure. They were quite comic, really. Their enormous shields, which were curiously patterned with geometrical figures and scrolls and devices, looked extremely heavy, which would account for the straddle-leg stance each one of them had. Poor things, she thought. They have to stand like that all the time just to stay upright. The one to her left had incredibly shifty eyes beneath his helmet, and she said to herself that she would call him Alf, after an uncle of hers with eyes like that. But then she reflected that his not quite identical twin to her right, she couldn't see his eyes at all, because his helmet was too big for him, should therefore be called Ralph. R for right, you see. So mentally she corrected the spelling of the first one's name to Alf. Not that it mattered to anyone else, because she wouldn't be writing their names down. Having settled in her mind the business of names, she noticed the most remarkable thing of all, was that from underneath each shield peered another face, upside down, a little like a jack of spades gone wrong. The upside-down characters, who she named Jim and Tim, the first rhymed pair that came to her mind, seemed to be hanging on to their uncomfortable positions by the great gnarled and horny hands she could see gripping the bottom of the shields. They must have added more to the burden under which Alf and Ralph staggered. It was Jim upside down who made her jump by addressing her. He added, and that's only half of it. Half of what? Asked Sarah, twisting and ducking her head to get a good look at Jim's face. It would, she felt, have been very faintly rude to remain upright. You had to adjust to the people you meet, even here. Half of twice as much, Jim replied. Twice as much as what? Sarah was exasperated. Twice as much of half of it. Look. Sarah raised a finger and pointed to the back wall of the chamber. That was a dead end a moment ago, she said. No, it was Tim upside down speaking now. That's the dead end behind you. She stood upright and turned around. He was right. The way by which she had come here was indeed now barred by solid wall. Oh, she exclaimed indignantly. That's not fair. This place keeps changing. What am I supposed to do? It depends on what you're It depends who you're doing the supposing, said Jim. Not half, Tim agreed. Try one of the doors, suggested Jim. One of them leads to the castle, Tim told her in a cheerful voice, and the other leads to certain death. Sarah gasped. Which is which? Jim shook his upside-down head. We can't tell you. Why not? We don't know, Jim crowed triumphantly. But they do. Tim nodded confidently at Alf and Ralph. That took some doing, upside down, Sarah thought. Then I'll ask them, she said. Before she could say anything, Ralph was speaking in a very slow, pedantic voice. No, you can't ask us. You can only ask one of us. He appears to be having difficulty getting all the words, especially the C's and K's. It's in the rule. It's in the rules. Alf's voice came fast and sneering. At the same time, his eyes shifted uneasily. He was tapping a finger on some ciphers on his shield, which are presumably the rules. And I think I should warn you that one of us always tells the truth and one of us always lies. That's a rule too. His glance flickers at Ralph's. He always lies. Don't listen to him, Ralph said sententiously. He's lying. I'm the one that tells the truth. That's a lie, Alf retorts. Jim and Tim were snickering behind the shields rather insolently, she thought. You see, Tim told Sarah, even if you ask one of them, you won't know if the answer you get is true or false. Now wait a minute, she said. I know this riddle. I've heard it before, but I've never figured it out. She heard Ralph muttering to himself, He's lying. He's lying. He's lying, Alf replied. Sarah was scratching her brow. There's one question I can ask, and it doesn't matter which I ask it. There's one question I can ask, and it doesn't matter which one of them I ask. I ask it. She clicked her tongue impatiently with herself. Oh, what could it be? Come on, Tim said technically. We can't sit around all day here. What do you mean we can't? Jim snapped. That's our job. We're gatekeepers. Oh yes, I forgot. Be quiet, Sarah ordered. I can't think. I tell the truth, Ralph declared pedantically from under his helmet. Ooh, Alf answered mechanically. What a lie. Sarah was trying to work it out logically for herself. With a finger thoughtfully in the air, she reasoned. The first thing to do is to find out which one's the liar. But no, there's no way of doing that. So the next thing to do is to find a question you could put to either one and get the same answer. Oh, that's a good one, Tim was guffawing. One of us always tells the truth and the other one always lies. And you want to find a question we'll both get the same answer to? Oh, that'll be the day. That's a good one, that is. Oh. Sarah narrowed her eyes. She thought she might have gotten it. Now, she said, whom shall I ask? Alf and Ralph pointed at each other. With a little smile, Sarah said to Ralph, answer yes or no. Would he, she pointed at Alf, tell me that this door, she pointed at the door behind Ralph, lead to the castle? Alf and Ralph looked at each other, and then looked at her, and looked back at each other again. They conferred in whispers. Ralph looked up at her. Yes? Then the other door leads to the castle, Sarah concluded. And this door leads to certain death. How do you know? Ralph asked slowly. His voice was aggrieved. He could be telling you the truth. Then you wouldn't be, Sarah replied. So if you tell me that he said yes, I know the answer was no. She was very pleased with herself. Alf and Ralph looked dejected, feeling that they have obscurely been cheated. But I could be telling the truth, Ralph objected. Then he would be lying, Sarah said, allowing herself a broad smile of pleasure. So if you tell me that he said yes, then the answer will still be no. Wait a minute, Ralph said. He frowned. Is that right? I don't know, replied Alf airily. I wasn't listening. It's right, Sarah told him. I figured it out. I never could until now. She beamed. You may be getting smarter. She walked to the door behind Alf. Very clever, I'm sure, Jim remarked disappointedly, and stuck his tongue out at her. She stuck hers out back at him as she pushed open the door. Over her shoulder she left them and said, This is a piece of cake. She stepped through the doorway and fell straight down the shaft. Sarah screamed. The top of the shaft was a fast dwindling disk of light. Chapter 5. Bad Memories. As she screamed, dropping backwards down the shaft, Sarah realized that her fall was being slightly impeded by things brushing against her. Large, thick leaves they might be, or some sort of tough fungus sprouting from the walls of this pit. Whatever they were, she tried to grab hold of one to save herself from the terrible smash she expected every instant. But she was falling too fast. Then, by blind chance, her wrists landed smack on one of those things, which at once closed firmly. With a jolt that almost disjointed her, she found herself dangling by one arm. Oh, she gasped in relief, and felt herself heaving for breath. She looked down at the shaft to see how close she had been to breaking every bone. All she could see was a long tunnel, lined with the things that had broken her fall. She looked up. The doorway through which she had entered the shaft was very high above her. As her eyes adjusted to the gloomy light, As her eyes adjusted to the gloomy light, she saw what it was that had caught hold of her. A hand. All around her, protruding from the sides of the shaft, hands were groping the air, like reeds under water. Her relief gave way to a sick feeling. She was in the grip of a hand with no arm or body attached to it, and she had no apparent means of even releasing herself. Perhaps they were carnivorous hands, or like those spiders that simply dissolved you away over a long period of time. She looked nervously up and down the shaft again, this time to see if there were any skeletons dangling there, as in a jungle trap. She saw none. And as she felt other hands reaching for her and finding her, taking hold of her by the legs and the body, there were hands on her thighs, her ankles, her neck. She shuddered and shouted, "Stop that!" Knowing that it was futile, she called, "Help! Help!" Oh god. My throat got real dry real quick, excuse me. Excuse me, my goodness. Help! Help! She writhed, trying to shake them all off. And with her free hand reached out for a hold, in a despairing attempt to climb away. All she could see to grasp hold of was yet another hand. Are you dying? I am not dying, Wasabi. I'm okay. It's just a dry throat syndrome with allergies. It's the worst. All she could see to grasp hold of was yet another hand. Hesitantly, she put hers in it, and it responded immediately, grabbing her hand firmly. With the idea of perhaps climbing up the hands as though on a ladder, she tried to free her wrist from the first hand. It was no good. She was now more tightly held than ever, stuck in a web of hands. "Help!" she whispered. She felt a tap on her shoulder and turned her head to see what it was. To her bewilderment, she saw that hands to one side of her contrived to form themselves into a face of sorts, with finger and thumb circles for eyes, and two hands working together to fashion a mouth. The mouth spoke to her. "What do you mean, help?" it said. "We are helping. We're helping hands." "You're hurting," she told them. It was not quite true. Fear rather than pain was what afflicting her. Now there were several more faces of hands around her. "Would you like us to let go?" one of them asked. Sarah glanced down the shaft. Well then, one of the moths said. Come on, which way? Which way? She asked, nonplussed. Up or down? Oh, she was more confused. She was even more confused. She looked back up the shaft towards the light, but that would be a kind of retreat. She looked down into the unknown, unfathomable abyss. Come on, an impatient voice urged her. Excuse me. We haven't got all day. Haven't you? Sarah thought to herself. It's a big decision for her, said a sympathetic voice. Which way do you want to go? Asked an insistent one. Everyone in the labyrinth was so peremptory. I've got a good reason to be in a hurry, Sarah felt. I've only got 13 hours to find my baby brother, and heaven knows how much time has already gone by. But why are all these people, if you can call them people, so bossy? Come on. Well, Sarah still hesitated. Up was chicken, down was dreadful. Many faces were watching her indecisiveness. Several of them were snickering, covering their mouths with another hand. She took a deep breath. Well, since that's the way I'm pointed, I'll go down. She chose down. She heard the snickers behind their hands. She chose down. Was that wrong? Sarah inquired timidly. Too late now, said one of the hand faces, and with that they started to hand her down the shaft, not roughly. She heard them singing something like a shanty. Down, down, down. Down, hand her down, boys. We'll all go to town, boys. Down, down, down. Down, hand her down, boys. Never a frown, boys. Down, down, down. And down she went, far down, until she found herself held momentarily above a manhole, while helping hands removed the cover of it. Then the lowest hands let her go, dropping her neatly down the manhole, and the last she saw of the hands were there waving goodbye helpfully. As she landed on the stone floor of a dark, small cell, the cover was replaced on the manhole with a clunk. In pitch darkness, Sarah sat down. Her face was blank. The picture of her silent face was clearly beamed into a crystal in the chamber of the Goblin King. She's in the oubliette, Jareth observed. The goblins cackled wickedly, dancing and prancing around. Their jaws gaped with merriment, and they slapped their thighs. Shut up, Jareth told them. They froze. Their heads twitched around to look at the king. A sly goblin inquired, Wrong laugh? She shouldn't have gotten as far as the oubliette. Jareth was still staring at the picture of Sarah's face in the crystal. He shook his head. She should have given up by now. She'll never give up, said a king goblin. Ha! Jareth laughed mirthlessly. Won't she? She'll give up soon enough when she has to start all over. It pleased him to think of his labyrinth as a board game. If you got too close to a winning square, you might find a snake taking you back to the start. No one had, and very few had gone as far as this disturbing girl, who was too old to be turned into a goblin. Jareth examined her face in his crystal. Too old to be a goblin, but too young to be kept by him. Damn her innocent eyes. She had to be sent back to square one immediately, before she became a serious threat to Toby. And he knew the snake for the job. Hoggle! He called, spinning the crystal. Hoggle's face appeared in it. She's in the oubliette, Jareth said. Get her back to the outer walls. Hoggle cocked his head, grimacing. She's quite determined, Your Majesty. It won't be an easy. Do it. Jareth flipped the crystal into the air, where it vanished like a bubble. He chuckled, imagining Sarah's face when she found herself beside Hoggle's pond again. Then he threw back his head and roared. The goblins watched him uncertainly. Was it all right to laugh now? Well, go ahead, Jareth told them. With the simple glee that is natural to evil-hearted folks, the goblins launched themselves into their full routine of cackles and snickers. The king goblin directed them like a conductor, bringing them up to a crescendo of malign mirth. Sarah sat on the floor of the black cell, wishing she had the helping hands to take her up the shaft towards the light. What could she hope for in this place? 4 of her senses sharpened in the darkness. She detected little scratching sounds. Who's there? Who's there with me? Her body was tense with alarm. Me, a gruff voice replied. There was another noise of scratching, followed by a glare of light as a match ignited and in turn set a torch aflame. Hoggle was sitting there on a rough bench, holding the torch up so that he and Sarah could see each other. Oh, she said. I'm so glad to see you, Hoggle. She was so relieved that she could have hugged him. Yes, well, Hoggle said briskly, as though he was slightly embarrassed by the situation. Well, nice to see you too. Sarah went to stand beside him in the torchlight. What are you doing here? How did you get here? Hoggle shrugged and half turned away. I knows you were going to get into trouble as soon as I seen yous. Oh god, this broken English, hold on. I knows you were going to get into trouble as soon as I sees you. So, I've come to help give you a hand. A helping hand, Sarah thought, and shivered. She had enough of them. You mean, she asked, you're going to help me unriddle the labyrinth? Unriddle the labyrinth, Hoggle answered scornfully. Don't you know where you are? She looked about her. In the circle of torchlight she saw stone walls, stone floor, stone ceilings. One rough wooden bench was an only luxury. Oh, she's looking around now, is she? Hoggle's scorn had turned to sarcasm. I suppose the little miss hasn't noticed there ain't no doors. Just a hole up there. Sarah peered as hard as she could into the shadows and realized that he was right. This, Hoggle was saying, is an oubliette. The labyrinth's full of them. She was stung by his knowing, mocking tone of his voice. Really, she replied, matching sarcasm. Now fancy that. Don't try to sound smart, he told her. You don't know what an oubliette is. Do you? Yes, said Hoggle with a touch of pride. It's a place you put people to forget about them. She remembered her verbs in French class, and pleased with herself, said, Of course, it comes from the French verb oublier, to forget. But you already knew that, naturally. Hoggle raised his chin to scratch it, at the same time letting his eyes roll portentously around the cell. What he had said began to sink in, and Sarah looked at the flickering stone walls and shuddered. To forget about them. Was that what Jareth was doing with her? Just forgetting about her? She began to feel indignant. It wasn't fair. He had challenged her to this contest. All the odds were stacked against her, but she had made a brave enough start. He couldn't now just dump her in here to rot. Could he? Hoggle had taken the torch and waddled into one corner of the oubliette. He beckoned her to follow. She did, casting a great shadow across the wall. Lying in the corner was a skeleton on its back, knees bent, head propped against the wall. She put her hand to her mouth and was about to scream, then thought better of it. She would force herself to remain cool. You see, Hoggle was squinting up at her, this labyrinth is a dangerous place. No place for a little girl. She looked at him. Who was he calling little? He nodded at the skeleton. That's how you'll end up if you keep going. In an oubliette like him. Lots of bad memories in the labyrinth, I can tell you. What you got to do, little missy, is get out of here. But I must find my baby brother. Forget all that. Now it so happens, Hoggle said, scratching his cheek with a forefinger, that I know a shortcut out of the whole labyrinth from here. No, she said at once. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up now. I've come too far. I've done too well. He nodded and in a smooth voice assured her, You've been wonderful. He shook his head and made a sucking noise on his teeth. This is only the edge of the labyrinth. You've hardly started. From here on in, it gets worse. There was something in his confidential tone that made Sarah suspicious. Why are you so concerned about me? She asked him. What? Hoggle sounded grieved. I am, that's all. A nice young girl, terrible black oubliette. Listen, Sarah interrupted him. You like jewelry, don't you? He pursed his face. Why? He asked slowly. You got some very nice pieces. She pointed to the chain of ornaments dangling from his belt. In the torchlight, she could not be sure, but she fancied that a smirking little blush was on his whiskery cheek. Thank you, he said. If you help me through the labyrinth. She took a deep breath. I'll give you... She slipped off her bracelet. It was only a cheap plastic thing, not one of the special ones that her mother had given her, and which she wore when she was going out. This, she concluded, holding it out to him. Huggle licked his lips and eyed the bracelet appraisingly. You like it, don't you? She could see that he did. He also had an eye for the ring on her finger. It had no intrinsic value either, though Sarah was fond of it because her mother had worn it when playing Hermione in The Winter's Tale. So, Hoggle said. Tell you what, you give me the bracelet and here's what I'll do. I'll show you the way out of the whole labyrinth. How's that? You were going to do that in any case, she pointed out. Yes, he replied. That's what made it a particularly nice gesture on your part. He held out his hand. Oh, no. Sarah withdrew the bracelet abruptly. For this you must show me the way in. The whole way. Hoggle snorted. What makes the little miss so certain I knows my way through it? Well, she answered. You got here, didn't you? What? Hoggle clucked, shaking his head. Yes, but I told you. This is just the fringe of it all. You've got nowhere yet. Come on, where's your common sense? You don't want to go no farther than this, really. You've done all you can and more. You've proved you're a smart, brave girl, and you don't deserve what would become of you in here. He glanced pointedly at the skeleton, which seemed to be jiggling in the flickering light of the torch. No, you deserve to be saved from that, and I'll say as much for you. So how about it? He gazed up at her with eyes of piggy shrewdness from beneath sprouting eyebrows. She looked back at him candidly. Whatever his game was, he played it badly. She had to bite her lip to stop herself from giggling at him. I'll tell you what, she said, narrowing her eyes. If you won't take me all the way to the labyrinth, just take me as far as you can, and then I'll try to do the rest myself. He looked disgusted with her. Gah! Of all the headstrong numbskulls I've ever came across. Sarah dangled the bracelet before his eyes. Fair deal, she offered. No strings, one bracelet. How about it? The bracelet danced in her hand, and his eyes were dancing with it. Grudgingly he asked, What is this, anyway? Plastic. His eyes shone. Then he raised his stumpy arm for Sarah to put the bracelet onto his wrist. He looked at it there and could not conceal his pride. I don't promise nothing, he said, but... He grunted resignedly. I'll take you as far as I can. Then you're on your own, right? Right. He nodded. His eyes were still shining as he looked at the bracelet on his wrist. Plastic, he murmured, thrilled. Come on then, Sarah urged him. Hoggle sprang into action. He seized a heavy wooden bench, and with a strength Sarah wouldn't have suspected in his small and round-shouldered body, he upended it so that the seat was flat against the wall. Sarah was surprised to see two doorknobs on the underside of the seat, one on the left and one on the right, and she was disconcerted when Hoggle turned the one on the seat. When Hoggle turned one knob, and the seat became a door into the stone wall. That's not fair, she thought. With a mischievous grin, because he was enjoying himself, showing off to the young miss, Hoggle walked through the doorway. She was about to follow him when she heard a crashing and clattering. Broomsticks and buckets fell out of the doorway and onto the oubliette. She grinned, recognizing the old broom closet joke. Oh, damn, she heard Hoggle say, within the cupboard. He came out backwards and avoided her eyes. He thrust the brooms and buckets back inside the closed door. Still sheepish, he grasped the other doorknob. Can't be right all the time, can we? He murmured. This time he opened the door rather less boldly. He peered through. This is it, he told her. Come on, then. She followed him into a dimly lit corridor with walls of grotesquely carved. Words are hard, y'all. With grotesquely carved rocks. They were working their way along the corridor when a voice boomed, "Don't go on." Sarah jumped violently and looked all around her. She saw no one except Hoggle. And then she realized, carved into the stone wall was a mouth. Standing back from it, she saw that the mouth was part of a huge face. Similar faces lined both sides of the corridor. As she and Hoggle passed them, each intoned a deeply resonant message. "Go back while you still can. This is not the way. Take heed and go no farther. Beware, beware. It will soon be too late." Sarah put her hands over her ears. The warning seemed to be echoing inside her head. Hoggle, bustling onwards, looked around to see where she had gone to and saw her standing. "Pah!" He waved his hands. "Don't take no notice of them. They're just phony warnings. You got a lot of them in the Labyrinth. It means you're on the right track." "Oh, no, you're not," a face boomed. "Do shut up," Hoggle snapped back at it. Sorry, said the face. "Only doing my job." "Well, you don't need to do it with us," Hoggle answered, and led the way down the passage. The face watched them go. "Shrewd cookies," it murmured appreciatively. The passageway twisted and turned, but on the whole, Sarah had the impression that they were moving forward. Such a direction existed in the Labyrinth, and she felt encouraged. They passed another carved face. "Oh, beware," the face declaimed. "For don't bother," Hoggle flapped his hands dismissively. "Oh, please," the face begged. "I haven't said it for such a long time. You have no idea what it's like stuck in here in this wall. And with all right, Hoggle told it. "But don't expect us to take any notice." The face brightened up. "Oh no, of course not." It cleared his throat. "For the path you take will lead to your certain destruction." It paused. "Thanks," it added politely. While the face was droning on, a small crystal ball had been rolling and skipping down the passage from behind Sarah and Hoggle. It overtook them. Excuse me. It overtook them as they turned a corner and saw it bounce on ahead of them. A blind beggar squatted with his back to the wall, his hat upturned on the ground in front of his feet. The crystal ball hopped up smartly into the hat. Sarah heard Hoggle groan. She looked at him. His mouth was open, and his eyes were staring at the hat on the ground. The beggar turned his face towards them. "So what have we here?" Nothing," Hoggle spurted. Nothing? The beggar rose up. Hoggle froze, and Sarah gasped. It was Jareth. "Your Majesty!" Hoggle bowed so obsequiously that he was at the risk of performing a forward roll. "What?" He swallowed and smiled haggardly. "What a nice surprise." "Hello, Hedgewort," said the king of the goblins. "Hogwart," Sarah corrected him. "Hoggle," Hoggle said, gritting his teeth. "Hoggle," Jareth said, in a kindly conversational tone. "Can it be that you are helping the girl?" "Helping?" Hoggle perverserated. "In what sense? In the sense that you are taking her farther into the Labyrinth," Jareth said. "Oh," Hoggle replied. "In that sense, yes." "In that sense, yes." "Oh, no, Your Majesty, I was leading her back to the beginning." "What?" Sarah exclaimed. Hoggle forced his lips into an ingratiating smile for Jareth. "I told her I was going to help her unriddle the Labyrinth. Little trickery on my part," he guffawed and gulped. "But actually..." Jareth, smiling pleasantly, interrupted him. "And what's this plastic trinket around your wrist?" "This... I... Hoggle looked wide-eyed at the bracelet, which someone must have slipped onto his wrist when he was snoozing, and which he had unaccountably not even noticed until it was there that moment. Why, he stuttered. My goodness, well, I never. Where did this come from? Hoggle? If I thought you were betraying me, I would be Hoggle, Jareth spoke levelly. If I thought you were betraying me, I would be forced to suspend you head first in the bog of eternal stench. Oh no, your majesty. Hoggle's knees were wobbling. Not that. Not the eternal stench. Oh yes, Hoggle. Jareth turned and smiled at Sarah. And you, Sarah, how are you enjoying the labyrinth? Sarah swallowed. Beside her, she heard Hoggle's feet shuffling. Determined not to allow Jareth to intimidate her, she affected a nonchalance that she was far from feeling. She hesitated. It's a piece of cake. Jareth raised one elegant eyebrow. Hoggle's eyes closed in dismay. Really? Jareth sounded intrigued. Then how about making a more entertaining challenge? He looked up, and into the space of air before his eyes, the 13-hour clock appeared. He gestured gracefully, and the hands visibly began to turn faster. That's not fair, said Sarah. You say that so often, I wonder what your basis for comparison is. Jareth took the crystal ball from his hat and tossed it back down the tunnel again. At once, from the darkness came a noise. A crashing, whirling, trundling noise, distant as yet, but getting closer all the time, and louder. Hoggle's face was a mask of panic. Sarah found herself instinctively shrinking away from the approaching din. The labyrinth is a piece of cake, is it? Jareth laughed. Now we can see how you deal with this little slice. While his mocking laugh still rang, he vanished. Sarah and Hoggle stared along the passageway. When they saw what was coming at them, their jaws dropped and they trembled. A solid wall of furiously spinning knives and chopping cleavers were bearing inexorably down upon them. Dozens of keen blades glittered in the light, every one of them pointing forward and whirring wickedly. The wall of blades completely filled the tunnel, like a subway train, and would chop them into little pieces in the blink of an eye. And Sarah noticed with horror, along the bottom of the slashing machine was a busy row of brushes tidying up after itself. Oh my god, words! And Sarah noticed with horror, along the bottom of the slashing machine was a busy row of brushes for tidying up after itself. The cleaners! Hoggle shrieked and took off. What? Sarah was so terrified she was mesmeristically rooted to where she stood. Run! Hoggle's shouts came, echoing back from some distance away, and brought her to her senses. She dashed after him. The slashing machine came clanking and trundling remorselessly on behind them. All it needed for the story to finish now was that they should have came to a dead end. Around the corner they found one. A heavily barred door closed the tunnel in front of them. And I think I shall leave it here for this time, because we have reached 2 hours. And I got a bunch of stuff I gotta take care of today. But this is good and this is fun. This is definitely a different take than the movie. So I'm enjoying it. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. And we'll definitely continue this next week. So tomorrow I don't believe I will have a stream. I was thinking about maybe doing an impromptu one, but I don't know, maybe not. Little zany book, it's a zany little book. It's fun. It's a fun story. But yeah, we'll definitely continue this next week for next week's story time. So tomorrow there's not gonna be a stream. I was thinking about maybe doing an impromptu one, but let me see how I feel. If not, then of course we'll come back Thursday with an art stream. We're gonna do a drawing stream. We're gonna finish off the drawing that we started last time, and we'll be doing that. So I hope you guys take care. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, night, evening, whatever the case may be. And of course, I hope tomorrow you guys have a lovely and wonderful day. And I'll be seeing you guys on Thursday for the art stream, for the fun little art stream. Yes. So thank you all so much for being here. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. And remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. I love you all so very, very, very much, and I cannot wait to see you again on Thursday. Take care, you guys. Mwah! So I'll be seeing you. Bye!